Welcome. Well, you're at home with Jim and Joy, and you are an important part of our EWTN family. And we're so delighted that you've welcomed us into your home. We would love to hear from you, so send us an email with a question or a comment to jimandjoy@ewtn.com. Well, today we have a very young and beautiful woman on our show. Her name is Margaret Walsh, and she is the founder of a beautiful ministry called Secret Garden Educational Pathways. You could go to her website. It's called secretgardenep.com. And we're delighted to have Margaret. We went to her website and we, clicked on all her little videos and things that she had. Just outstanding. And the beautiful vocation that God has called her to.
Vocation to reach out to young people through their parents, to reach out to young people through Catholic schools, to reach out to young people especially that might have some special needs, some special conditions, so special education. And she's just an absolute delight. Like you said, she's quite young and very dedicated Catholic. I think she was a homeschooler herself. And I just keep thinking of the movie on Helen Keller. And who is
Anne Sullivan.
Anne Sullivan, Helen Keller, and how Anne Sullivan had this burden and desire to find the pathway to help people who were blind and people who were deaf. No, she could speak, Helen Keller, I think. But when you're blind and you can't hear, it's really difficult to speak, right? And how she worked with her again and again, and how Helen Keller would resist her. And how even the family sometimes said, well, you're just pushing this too far. You got control over her now. But she said, no, I want her to learn. I want her to understand. I want her to make the connection between the hand language I'm doing and what this object is or who the person is or what's going on. And finally, she gets in touch with water, right? She finally says, wah. She says water, which was a word she had said before she got sick and ill as a young girl. And then you see near the end of the show that Helen Keller is in the lap of
Anne Sullivan.
Who
is Anne Bancroft.
I keep thinking of Anne Bancroft. And she's in her lap, and she wants to know who she is, And she says, I'm the teacher. I'm the teacher. And I think that's where Margaret Walsh is. I think Margaret Walsh wants to help people to learn, especially those that might have some difficulties for whatever reason, like dyslexia or comprehension and writing and what's going on. She wants to come up alongside parents, she and her staff, she has a great staff, and just help homeschool moms with particulars in learning situations, as well as Catholic schools that may not have special education teachers that come up alongside of them. It's a beautiful, beautiful ministry. It's Secret Garden Educational Pathways. What does that mean, Secret Garden? Why did she name it that? What pathways are you talking about? What sort of processes are you speaking about? It's secretgardenep.com, secretgardenep.com. As a parent, this might be just what you've been praying about to help you along with your child, to give you a little more help, a little more aid. Or maybe you're a principal at a Catholic school or a teacher at a Catholic school. You say, well, we could use a little bit more. Somebody pulling up alongside of us, sharing with us how best to reach this young person and doing it together. We'll be right back. It's a very special show. There's plenty more to come. Please don't go away.
Welcome back. Well, you're at home with Jim and Joy, and today we bring to you beautiful Margaret Walsh, who is the founder of Secret Garden Educational Pathways. You could go to their great website. It's called secretgardenep.com. Well, Margaret, we want to welcome you to At Home with Jim and Joy, and we're so delighted to have you. And we would like for you to share with our family a little bit about your own background, how you got involved in this ministry, this vocation, this beautiful educational way. So we're so delighted to have you.
Thank you so much. It's a blessing to be here with you guys. Sure, I'd love to share with you guys where I came from and how God led me to this vocation, because I believe it truly is a vocation for me. It's not often that you find a career that is a vocation, and it's such a blessing that God has shown me this and that I've been able to help reach these students. Growing up, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, so that's probably where I get some of my ease in working with children, is that have grown up working with my younger siblings, and seeing the beautiful Catholic family life that my parents created for me growing up. After high school, I went to Thomas Aquinas College, which was very foundational and formative for me. And that is where I gained some of my inspiration for working with these students. And then when I was finding jobs in the summers between semesters, God led me to Lindemood Bell Learning Processes, which is a specialty school that helps students with things like dyslexia and comprehension difficulties, global learning difficulties, autism spectrum, and they do a phenomenal job working with students. And that's where I was first introduced to remediation and special education work, was again more of the remediation side. And it was just wonderful to see the students start at the beginning with some of them started with almost no skills whatsoever. And then by the time you worked with them for several weeks, you saw them grow and open up and blossom in a way that I've never seen anyone grow like that before. And it was phenomenal to see that. And you see them reach this point where something clicks, and that's the best moment in a teacher's life. I'm sure this goes for any teacher out there, special education or non-special education, and that brought so much joy. I mean, there were a lot of struggles when you work with students who have special learning needs, because each student is so different. But when you reach that point where it made sense to them, it was just amazing. So that's where I was first introduced to special education, and then seeing the connection between the special education and the philosophy and theology I was doing at college was really eye-opening for me, because I didn't realize there was such a connection between what they're teaching special education personnel today and what Aristotle talked about so long ago with how a person learns. That even though students who have special learning needs might learn a little bit differently, it still follows a pattern that Aristotle saw long ago. And I know this is going to sound a little bit strange for people who are maybe in the special education field, or for families of students with special learning needs, that something discovered so long ago in the philosophy of thought would be applicable today. But at least for me, it's been really beautiful to see that connection, and it helps me understand things better myself. So hopefully I can bring some of that understanding to people.
Well, you have shared a mouthful. You really have. Yeah, and I mean that, positively, but it's so much to unpack. I go back to what you were sharing about the difficulties, you were learning from people while you were getting educated, and how hard it is to kind of break through, or to find that pathway, so to speak, and that way. But when you do, when you see it, again, as we were sharing at the outset, you saw that in the film of with Helen Keller, when Anne Sullivan finally helped her somehow, or it just happened. I don't know how the pathway was there. I guess it was the pump, and she did the pump, I don't know how many times, and the water, but somehow it connected with something very seminal there, and it unlocked something. And that part of the movie, for those of us viewing this, and for Anne Sullivan, and then Patty Duke, who's playing Helen Keller, going up to her face, and so this moved you when you saw this happening, and you're saying, I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part.
Yes.
As difficult as this is. Speak to us. I mean, you're using some terminology, secret garden. That's a little bit strange, the name, secret. Sometimes I say the sacred garden. I guess they're both there, the secret garden, the sacred garden. I say sacred because I'm mispronouncing. It's secret, but I think there's a connection there. And then you're speaking about philosophy. You're speaking about Catholicism. Some people are going to say, well, what is she talking about, philosophy and Catholicism, when this is a scientific thing, maybe. This is a technical thing. This is a science regarding special education. This is about the brain, or this is about how people see, or, just unpack that more for us. The pathways, philosophy, Catholicism, the science of this. You're going to have to say it a number of times for me to understand it. I know that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'd love to do that. So the name Secret Garden, I'm a very literary person. I love literature and poetry and beautiful things like that. And I was inspired to call it Secret Garden because what I see in the students learning to overcome their struggles is a parallel journey to the girl in Secret Garden, where she finds the key to the secret garden that's all overgrown with weeds. The pathways are in disuse. Nothing's been maintained. She unlocks the garden, and then she goes in and she cleans it up and creates this beautiful garden, and brings her friends to it, and really opens up the hearts of those who are around her. And I use that as the name because it's a parallel example with students who have special learning needs. In a sense, we help them find the key as much as we can to unlocking that connection, kind of like Helen Keller, to the world around them. Because a lot of times when students have special learning needs, it's difficult for them to connect with the world outside of them. And you're totally right. The special education world is much more scientific, and the techniques that are used are scientific. Any good special education professional is going to have the background behind them in order to properly serve the students that they are working with. But that being said, there's a lot of connection between that and the philosophy that I mentioned before. So helping the student unlock the door and connect with the world outside of them. The connection that is seen is that when Aristotle and St. Thomas talk about the way that we come to know and understand, we interact with the world around us through our senses, and through the pathway that connects our senses to our mind, and then through the different pathways within our mind. So it is scientific, but at the same time, if you follow the same method, in a sense, that they brought to mind when they were talking about learning and understanding and memory, that is where you see this philosophy and theology coming in, which is really beautiful, especially from a Catholic point of view. You can see so much more than the average professional out there. And it's been such a blessing for me to have seen that and to be able to work in such a unique field with that unique perspective that God has blessed me with. Well, so that's the connection between the two.
That's good.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
Margaret, it makes so much sense because as a mother raising 4 children, one of my prayers would that the Lord would equip me as their mother to have the key to their hearts, so that I could then know who they are, why did God make them, the purpose for which God sent them. And so as a mother, as you're raising and rearing and training them, and then you come up with all your scientific education and you incorporate the whole spiritual and the philosophical life of it all, it makes a beautiful garden where you can say, as opposed to being separate, right? And say, okay, this is what I experience here in this intellectual, educational experience. Then my church is separate. So, but you're incorporating it all to really unlock the beauty of that child with the family in homeschooling situations. How are the parents responding to this?
The parents love it. It's amazing working with the parents. I've worked with so many amazing families. The students are great. The families are really supportive. And when you work with these families, you see all the effort that they're putting into this to help their student, all the love that they have for their student. And like you said, as a mother, you're incorporating the education and the love in the home and the family and putting all of that together because you love your student and you see them as a whole person versus seeing them as a diagnosis, or seeing them, in this one setting over here, and then this, the church life and the family life is completely different. So the parents are absolutely loving it, and we've been able to help a lot of the families learn how to do some of these things with their students in conjunction with what we're doing. So again, coming from a homeschooling background and a beautiful Catholic family, that's one of the things that is really important to me, is to help the family learn how to work with their students, and also see the student as an entire person who is loved by a family, loved by God, versus seeing them as just a diagnosis where we would just want to get the scores up type thing. Gotcha. Because there's so much more to every single student than just the grades, even though grades are important, so much more.
Yes.
Yeah, there's so much more to every student. And what you seem to be doing, I mean, you're targeting Catholics. And And so you know their world. You're in their world, and their world is about faith, and the world is about Catholic understanding of philosophy. The world is about the church. The world is about, so this is their environment. And that's what you say, that it's so important that the environment has to be conducive. But when you say environment, there's a lot that goes into that, as well as their own home and dwelling place and all the other associations, the science that you're bringing forth to them. But you never know what's going to unlock a pathway that might not necessarily be per se scientific teaching, although it will line up with science. Speak more about the importance of the environment, the elements of the environment. And it was interesting, as I was going through your website, Joy and I, and looking at the video, you know, at first I was saying, you know, I don't know how this works when she's not with them, or the teachers aren't with them, you know, with that student. Although you are with them. I mean, you're with the mother, you're with them, but you're not there physically with them. And you mentioned as well that, you know, sometimes that works to the advantage of the situation. I'm saying, like, how does that work to the advantage? Because you were sharing, you know, knowing the students sometimes they're very anxious about the special need that they have or condition that they have, and there's a lot of anxiety, but you're saying the distance actually helps. They can still see you, they're in their own home, it's all there, they're not alone with a therapist face to face, and that sometimes this plays out better to reduce the anxiety and creates a better environment within the person, within that student, and within that home. Is that what you're saying, or something like that? Elaborate upon it.
Right, no, and this is a perfect example that we're doing the interview remotely, which is kind of a blessing in a sense because people can see it in action. I mean, I'm interacting with you guys. It's almost as if we're there in person. It's very similar when we're working with the students, that we're there with them and we get to know them pretty well. But for students who have special learning needs, many of them have anxiety or very low self-esteem, and working with them remotely, they're in their own house. They can wear their pajamas if they want to. Their mom can be sitting next to them if she wants to be there and if they want her. The environment is very important because they're comfortable. And when a student is comfortable with who they are and where they are, it opens up even more doorways. Wow. And so that is why it's not usually a difficulty working with the students online. They actually respond very well to doing that. However, I would say that there are some students where you would want to have a professional working with them in person. This isn't going to work for everyone, and it's not the magic pill for every single student, but it has worked very well for the past few years, working with them long distance, but at the same time, being with them through the journey, being next to them, so to speak.
Now, Margaret, do you do the diagnosis, or do they need to be in your program with a diagnosis? So let's say that a mother has concerns for their son or their daughter, or a grandparent has concern for their grandchildren. Do you take care of everything, or do they need to get that before they start your program?
That's an excellent question, because many students do have a diagnosis. When students are getting a diagnosis, right now it has to be done in person, which because of the psychologist, either a clinical psychologist or educational psychologist, has to observe the student in close proximity, watch all their behaviors to compile that into a diagnosis. So the families would go and get a diagnosis, and then they would come to us for help. However, I would say when you're talking about educational remediation, which is what we do, it's not specifically speech therapy or occupational therapy or any of those very specific therapies. It's a little bit broader, and we'll go into that maybe a little bit later. But as a mother, you know your student very well, and so we've worked with students who have had a diagnosis. We've also worked with many students who have not had a diagnosis, because there's room to do that without a diagnosis within the field of educational remediation. So yes, diagnosis, but we also work with families who don't. And again, that's because the parents usually know where their student is struggling. They can usually identify what are the specific areas that they feel their student is struggling in. And we can look at that. And as professionals, it's kind of like a physical therapist, at least in my mind. Someone who can get injured and go and see a doctor, and they will get an x-ray or something of the injured part, and then they'll go to a physical therapist. But in the course of that, the physical therapist will use a diagnosis, but they'll also see other things based on their experience with that type of injury, where they can adjust the program as needed according to their discretion as well. So I hope that answers your question about, yes, families, I don't discourage diagnosis whatsoever. I think it's a good thing. But again, if a family doesn't want to get a diagnosis, they can reach out and see what we can help them with without that.
And we're getting ready to conclude our time together, and we'll pick it up again on Friday. But I just wanted to be clear that you're working with homeschool moms and dads, and are you also working with Catholic schools to offer assistance?
Yes, absolutely. I've primarily worked with homeschoolers because that is the community that I've come from and that I know. But I am there to help Catholic schools as well. Part of the reason I founded this was because I saw the gap in the resources and training of a lot of the Catholic homeschools and Catholic private schools, that this is something that not many of them have. And I felt like I was called to kind of fill this gap.
Beautiful. Margaret, we look forward to continuing the conversation on Friday. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.
You.
Be right back. There's plenty more to come, so please don't go away.
Well, we will have They Might Be Saints by Father Patrick Peyton, and that's coming up next on Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And it's also available in the EWTN Religious Catalog. Now, Father Peyton was known as the Rosary Priest, and he popularized the saying, "The family that prays together stays together." So there, you'll get to see that beautiful show with Father Peyton.
Absolutely.
Which will be wonderful.
Well, what a blessed conversation with Margaret.
Yes.
And I hope it didn't sound like too much I didn't know what I was talking about.
You
but
did a great job.
I didn't really
You-
study
'cause you-
special education, you know, and it's like, it's really a complex thing. And that's why she went into it, because she wants to unlock the
Well-
learning ability of human beings. And it's so technical, but then we have a philosophical way in the Catholic tradition that helps as well. And then it's not that complicated in that you have the best environment possibly with your mom and with the church and with the world around you. And she's using all of that. And I just hope, I look forward to Friday's show, because I just think there's hundreds and thousands of homeschool parents that it'd be so beneficial to have her pull up alongside you, respecting that you're the key teachers. Like you said, who could do it better than, I know my child's heart, I'm trying to lock the keys of heart. But we don't have all the tools. We don't have all the science. So she comes up along and says, I respect your primary place. Here's some things that is scientifically true. Here's from the Catholic tradition and Catholic philosophy what's here. You're not alone. We're going to do this together. And then you start seeing this connection being made with the child in the way of learning.
Well, and she said such a beautiful thing about how that really affects children in their self-esteem. Like, I can remember when we were growing up with kids, if you were dyslexic, it didn't get diagnosed so much back then. And so kids were like slow readers, you got put in a different reading group. But then as special ed came into the public schools, then you were taken out. And what anxiety that puts upon a child, just to say, I'm different, I'm being taken out because I have a special condition or I have a disability in this area of either with math or with reading comprehension or with dyslexia. I'm just seeing everything backwards. And so there is certainly a place and a space for it. And with Catholic schools, we have children, we have grandchildren in the public school, we have grandchildren in Catholic schools, we have some that are being homeschooled. And so you see the great need for this, especially in Catholic schools that don't have the resources for it as the public schools would,
So thanks so much for being with us today. Thanks so much for being part of the family. And we have the power of the Holy Spirit, the great Catholic tradition, science itself, so that these children can fulfill all the potential that they have. You're an important part of this family, and you're always at home with Jim and with Joy. Bye now.